So we are moving to our next workshop now, which, this has been a long day of really, for FAIR especially, what could be considered heavier conversations and more intense conversations. And so we've tried to bookend it with some more, some less kind of heady diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, and some more traditional FAIR content and practical applications as well. And we have Tamara here next. And so I want to introduce Tamara from Paleotechnics, Arts and Technologies of Early Peoples. And so this is really, I'm really looking forward to seeing this. Let me bring you in here, Tamara. Thank you for being here. And I don't want to butcher the name of it, so I'm just going to use the common name. We're going to see from Tamara a live demonstration of extracting strong and silky bast fibers from Dogbane, and there's a Latin name for that, but I'm sure Tamara can say, and it's a pleasure to see you and meet you. We've only talked on email, so it's really great to see you in person. So she's going to use the Dogbane stalks and twist them into fiber into cordage using a log rolling method, splicing more fiber to create a long string and using that string to make a knotted net. So I look forward to seeing that. Tamara, take it away.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Brooks. It's great to see you in person.
Yeah.
And I've been watching this conversation for the last few hours as I was getting set up, and it's a really powerful and wonderful conversation. And I noticed at the very end, it sort of segued into a topic that is one that I deal with on a daily basis. And so I just want to introduce that, or I feel like it's a good segue to speak to it briefly and introduce who I am. My name is Tamara Wilder, and I call myself a paleotechnologist. By the way, names are important. Wilder is not a name that I took. It was my birth name. So it's not that I chose it. It's sort of, my name fits what I chose to do with my life. And I'm part of, my company is called Paleotechnics, and I teach ancient living skills. And the majority of what I do is get people to use their hands, which is a pandemic, universal human skill. Our hands are really what make us humans. And they're the thing that makes us technologically dependent creatures, because we're not really born with the things that we need on our bodies in order to survive. Instead, we're born with our hands, which have the ability to alter and change our world and make the things that we need. And that's how we have been existing on this planet for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. And so this is what we call a pandemic universal human heritage, essentially. And at the fair, I'm part of a booth called Archaeology Park, which is on the Upper River Loop. And just going to the fair's piece in this cultural appropriation part and acknowledging the unceded land of the Calapooya people, that's why the Archaeology Park booth exists. And there's some other Archaeology Park people here in this conversation I can see, but the reason we exist is, my recollection of it is around 30 years ago, one of our founders, John Stamp, who was an amateur archaeologist, realized that the fair site is one of the oldest archaeological sites in Oregon. And there's been some really, really old points that have been found there. And it was definitely a seasonal gathering place of the Calapooya people. So there's camas ovens, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And so over 30 years ago, they wanted to establish, sort of let people know that it isn't just a party site, it isn't just a place that people are coming, that it has been used as a gathering place, and also that the archaeological integrity of the land needed to be preserved and needed to be respected. And so that's what Archaeology Park does. And they are always there before people dig. We're trying to preserve any kind of things that are on the site so things don't get damaged. So they play a really, really big role. I'm not part of that role, that's the rest of our archaeology crew, but I'm part of the demonstration crew that comes for the fair. And what we're doing is just demonstrating ancient living skills. So the pandemic universal stuff, there is a whole display at Archaeology Park that talks about the Calapooya people. And several of our archaeologists are there so that they can talk to people who have questions. And so I feel like we're doing everything we can to honor Calapooya people as being indigenous to the area. But the way we do that the best, and in what I do personally for my life, is that I teach and get people to understand that the basic core pandemic universal skills that everybody on the planet has ancestors, hundreds and thousands of ancestors who have used to make us human for the last, 1.5 million plus years. And so string making is definitely many hundreds of thousands of years old. It's one of those core technologies that everybody on the planet used to know how to do. But now as modern people, we've sort of forgotten how to do that. We go to the store and we buy string at the hardware store, most of us, especially in the United States. In a lot of places where indigenous cultures are more active, or where indigenous cultures are still more part of the regular daily existence, people still know how to make string on a lot of the planet. But you know, it's been something that's been mechanized by modern society. And so that's what I want to demonstrate today, real briefly. It's going to be a quick demo. And this is what I do at the fair. If you come through the booth, there's a whole bunch of us there, and we're all demonstrating a bunch of different technologies. And one of my specialties is string making. And so I have this plant. This is the stalk right here of the Dogbane. This is the fiber that's already sort of, you can see this was a broken tip. And that's what we're extracting in order to make string. There's lots of plants that you can make fiber out of. The actual plant is right here growing, sort of bleached out, but it's this plant is my Dogbane plant in a pot. And it's a relative of milkweed. It's native to North America. And it is, and interestingly, it only grows in North America. And it is as high quality as the two main domesticated fibers of the world. So hemp is one that people hear about a lot nowadays, and linen, flax, which is what we make linen out of, are two of the biggest domesticated fibers. And hemp, native hemp, or the Dogbane, which is also called Indian hemp, because when people got here on the East Coast, when first contact was made, everybody that was coming from Europe were using hemp, and they realized that the native people on the East Coast whom they were meeting were using this plant called Dogbane, and they looked at it and said, wow, that's just as good as our hemp, so we're going to call it Indian hemp. And so the Latin name is Apocynum cannabinum, which means fiber bearing against dog plant, because the plant apparently has repelling qualities to dogs, the whole family. And so the Dogbane is one of these really, really amazing fibers. And I feel like we're incredibly fortunate to have growing wild all over North America, a fiber that is as high in quality as hemp and flax, which have been domesticated for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we can go around all over North America and we can just find patches of this and extract it and make string. And that's what all the different native tribes all over North America have done for a very long time. But fibers come from the stems of plants, and hemp comes from the exact same place on the plant, and so does flax. And so their processing is somewhat similar. The difference is that Dogbane is a perennial, so it dies and goes dormant, where hemp and flax are annuals. So they have to undergo a whole retting process. So there is a difference in the beginning. But because we are using a perennial plant, that I basically waited for it to go dormant, so I didn't have to do a retting process because the saps were all taken out by the natural processing of the plant. I harvested this stalk. I went in the patch in the fall and in the midwinter, and I harvested in the dead dormant state. I wasn't going to kill I'm not killing the plant because it was going dead and dormant, and it's going to send up a whole bunch of new growth in the spring. And so this stalk was never going to get used by the plant again. So I didn't have to worry about over harvesting. But so I came in and I harvested the plants, and actually by harvesting out the old dead stalks, the newer plants do better, because otherwise they get crowded and get sort of moldy and they don't have much space. So by taking away the old dead stalks, you give the new plants space the next year. So I've got the stem, and the first thing I need to do, this is called a bast fiber plant, B-A-S-T. And if anybody, I'm going to say it right now, you can go to paleotechnics.com, which is my website, paleotechnics.com. And on there is a new blog post, and it's all about the videos that are on our virtual website, our virtual booth right now. So if you go into the 3D reality, there's 4 videos playing right now in the virtual reality fair, and they're also on the blog on my website. So you can link them directly on YouTube. And one of them is all about plants for string making. So if you want to learn more about all these plants, you can do the whole photo slideshow. And then there's also a couple of ones on fire making and using bone tools. So if you miss this, if you don't get the whole thing, if you want to learn more, please go to the blog on my website, and then that will take you to all the YouTube links, and you can learn tons more about all this stuff. So the first step we have to do for string making, though, is we take the outer bark and we scrape it off, because bast fiber plants, the fiber is on the inner bark. And normally I put this on my knee, but because we're on Zoom, I'm holding it in the air and sort of shaky. But I'm just scraping off just that with my knife perpendicular to the stalk, so I'm not cutting anything. I'm just scraping off that very outer layer of bark. So you can see that this is a little bit fuzzy, and the next area that I didn't is a little bit shiny. And so that's what I'm doing, is just taking off that very, very, very thin layer of outer bark. And then I go up to the next thing from the next leaf node, to the next one and I scrape it. I like to change direction at this point, but I scrape it the opposite direction. And I can't get it too close to the camera doing this because I'll get a bunch of these fine powders in my keyboard, which isn't a good idea. So I'm just holding a little bit away from the camera right now. But in general, I'm going up the entire stalk, scraping off that outer bark. There's a lot of different fibers that you can process, and you do them all in different ways. But this is the way that I like to process the Dogbane stick. So I've already, in order to save time, I've already scraped this entire stalk, this other one. So if you can see, all the outer bark has been scraped all the way to the tip, and this was a place where the tip was broken. But in order to extract the fiber, I come in and I crack the stem and I squeeze it in a plane all the way down, because this, since it was just 1 year's growth, it's a hollow stem, so it's really easy to crack. And then I come back and I turn it around and I crack the other way. And then I've got it loose all the way. So then I can open the stem out with my fingers, and I roll it out flat like this, and I can slide my hand up and divide out all those nice strong fibers. And then I slide my thumb down and divide out all of these strong fibers. And I end up with the stick that I rolled flat. So instead of being a round stick, I've now made it into a flat stick, which put all of the bark on this side and all of the inside of the stick, the pith of the stick, on this side. So then I can hold it in my hand and I can crack off that woody part and get to that inner bark bast fiber part, which is just the very, very thin layer. So you can see it's a very thin layer of fiber here. I scraped off the outer bark here, and then I've broken off the wood here. And if I were just to pull on this, I would start to break fibers. So the way I like to do this, there's several different methods, but my favorite is I roll it over my finger. So I use this finger as a roller and I pull it down and I go down a couple inches and I try to get most of that fiber. I missed this one here. And then I crack it off right at that point. And if you can see, then when I pull backwards, I'm getting all those little bits of fiber that would have broken off if I just kept going in one direction. So I come back every inch, crack backwards. And if I do that properly, I'm controlling. There's a lot of control when I'm teaching this to people. It takes a little while, and people start with just one part of the stick or two parts of the stick, but I'm controlling them all with my fingers. And I'm removing that wood, and I'm ending up with the beautiful bast fiber stalk of the fiber. And there are tree bast fibers too. That's what cedar is. That's what redwood is. That's what basswood fiber is on the east coast of North America. And then in Hawaii, they have how bark. So those are all tree bast fibers, but these are stem bast fibers. And the other really well-known stem bast fibers are hemp and flax, like I said. But two of the other ones that grow here in North America that are really commonly used as well are nettles, stinging nettles, and milkweeds. So those are the other two main stem bast fibers that were used in this area traditionally, and nettles all around the world, and milkweed all around the world. Dogbane is the one that's very specific, that doesn't grow other places, but nettles and milkweed grow all around the world. So this is that fiber that I've extracted now. I'm getting dust all over my keyboard. So the way we make this into string now is, that's one of the reasons that Dogbane is so nice, is that it's a really long stalk, so you get a large amount of fiber from it. There's other short fibers that you can make. The wild irises give us fibers, the leaves, but the fibers are only usually about this long, so you have to do a lot of splicing. But the Dogbane, you can not do that much splicing. So to start setting up to make a new string, I fold it in half and I pull it over and I flip it the other way, and I try to make sort of this like staggered in thing, because I wanted to flip it around, because there was a skinny end to the stick and a thin end to and a thick end to the stick, and I didn't want to fold it in half and have this side be all skinny and this side be all thick. So by turning it around, I now have made them thick and thin so that this is even and it's folded right in the middle. So I can make a short string that will be about a foot long by just folding it over and twisting it into string. I'm going to do that now to show you just a short bast string. If I'm making a net, I would actually splice it on, but right now, just because for time, I'm just going to show you here how to make a really short piece of string. If I was planning on splicing and making a net out of this, I would have staggered all the ends so that I don't have an abrupt end. But right now I'm just going to do a short one and leave it full. So I'm spinning my right hand away from me and my left hand towards me, and I'm binding energy. This is all about science. When I do these programs with kids, it's hands-on, but we're teaching people science. This is using our hands is all about science. Technology. A friend of mine who happens to be Shumash, and we were doing a program together years ago, and she told me something that was really great, which is that our culture is defined by our technologies. So the technologies that we use define our culture, because that's what those physical things that surround us are, the things that we create and make, and they're based on the technologies that we understand and we use, because technology is how we utilize our hands and our brain to make and create the things that we need in our world. So when you're making your own string, you are creating something that is based on a really, really important technology of being able to take fibers and bind them around each other. So when you stop being able to make string and you have to go to the store and buy it, you're losing that connection with what created that at the beginning. So that's why practicing these skills and learning the base, the core technologies, the core science, the core thing that everything came from, even if you don't use it on a daily basis, it gives you a connection to your past. It gives you a connection of where you came from. And it also gives us a connection to the earth, because we know that we can live in some sort of symbiosis with the earth and some sort of balance with the earth. We have the ability to do it. Our ancestors have done it for longer than we haven't. So I've taken the string and I've folded it in half, and you're binding energy. This is that science. This is bound energy. When it tried to unbind itself, it wrapped around and grabbed itself so it doesn't come apart. And in order to continue making string, you can twist and reverse, and you're just putting one twisted away. This is not a very efficient way to make string, but on the screen here, I'm showing just the twist happening. I'm tightly twisting and reversing like that. Another way that you can do this is you can do what's called mouth twisting. So you can put it in your teeth, and you actually have to store a little bit of energy. So I'm over twisting, and then I'm putting it in my teeth, and I'm spinning down, and I'm twisting both of these to my left. And then the energy is releasing and making the string happen. Try to get closer to the camera here. So the energy is twisting and binding, and now that energy that I stored has gone away. So I'm holding it off. It still won't come apart because it's locking on itself, but it doesn't want to make more string because the energy has run out. So I have to store energy again by making it into a spring. So I twist it up and I store that energy in there. And then I bind it in my teeth again. And then I keep twisting both to my left. And I keep that nice 45-degree angle to let them flow down. I'm twisting both of them to my left. And that energy binds and makes it into a piece of string. When you go to the hardware store and you buy string that's been made, that same thing has been done, but we just use machines to do it now instead of our hands and our teeth or whatever body parts we have. That's a sort of in-between way of making string that's easy for me to visualize or to show everybody on the screen. I'm going to show you a leg rolling way next. So this is the way that is the most efficient. That is the way that everybody around the entire world has made string for hundreds of thousands of years, is by actually doing that, what I was just doing, by rolling your hand flat. Because if you're making enough string to make a net, or if you're doing something if you have a project, if you're making a rope. So I have some examples here, like this is, a lot of Dogbane string. This is many, many hours of making string out of this plant. If you've made that much string, or if you've done that 9 different times and made enough to twist them into a rope, or if you've made enough string in order to make a net, like what I'm going to add to right here, that's a lot of twisting. And so if you're doing this motion all the time, it's going to give you carpal tunnel and repetitive motion stuff going through your hands. And so hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago, our ancestors all figured out that you can't do this for very long, and that the more efficient way to do is using a flat hand. So the leg rolling is you put the fiber, you hold it in your left hand, because I'm right-handed. So I put it in my hand like this, and I use
Hello, everybody. It's Jeff Eichen here. She's decorticating hemp, and I'm the hemp meister. Can you hear me, Brooks? Brooks, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but she was in the middle of the presentation.
I know, but it's frozen now. So,
Oh, it's frozen for you too. Okay,
yeah, it's
gotcha.
frozen all the way through. So, she's doing some great hemp rope here, and it's called decorticating. I'm familiar with that, and bless her for
Oh,
doing.
she's back. She's back.
Okay.
Yes, I'm back. I'm back. I am so sorry that my computer just dropped me for some reason.
It
Okay,
happens. Thank
it
you.
happened. Okay,
Hey.
so we were in the middle of the twist. I'm going to do that again. Um, so I have held my energy here. I roll down my leg and I make it tight. And then all that energy is bound and I slide them together, but I don't want them to be crossing. They're right next to each other. If the video is showing it, they're
Yes.
parallel, but not wrapping around each other. So that means the energy has not been wasted. And now I tilt my hand slightly and I come backwards, and that allows them to wrap around each other. So do you see how much string I just made in just a simple swoop back and forth? I just made that much string. And then to do the next one, I just have to take it apart. So this is why people all around the world figured out leg rolling, is because it really is an incredibly efficient way of doing this. And it keeps you from getting carpal tunnel and repetitive motion, like I said. So we go like this, we roll down, we get it nice and tight, we shift and make it so that they're parallel, and then we roll down and we have our fiber again. So that's string making. That's the leg rolling method of string making. Like I said, fibers and string are made by lots of different methods all around the world, but this leg rolling is one of the oldest. And this we can keep going. Right now, since I just had it end here, and I have a big blunt end of a lot of fiber because I didn't stagger my start, I would just make string out to the end, and it will not come apart if I'm just holding it. But as it starts to get worked and used, it will untie. So you just tie an overhand knot at the end of whenever you want to stop it for a while, and then it holds together. So string is a building block of life. It's one of the oldest technologies that our ancestors figured out. Without it, we can't make nets, we can't make rope, we can't tie things together in any kind of good way. And we don't tend to use a string as much nowadays because we have zippers and buttons and Velcro and all that kind of stuff. But in the old days, string was it. If you didn't know how to make string and if you didn't know how to tie knots, you wouldn't be able to connect things. You wouldn't be able to tie things together. Even if you're gathering a bunch of sticks, it's really hard to carry a bunch of loose sticks. So this is something that a very long time ago people figured out the need for, and it comes through observing science, and it comes through observing natural processes and observing what happens when energy binds on something that's strong enough to not break under the force of that energy, which is where we start knowing about the different fiber plants. Because not every plant has the ability to be made into string, but the parts of the plant that make the strong fibers are the botanical structures of the plant. So what we're using here is the cambium layer, and this is more science, like I said. So this is doing these ancient technologies is really getting a deep understanding of earth sciences and a hands-on, like in-person understanding. So this one is the end of my net that's attached to this piece of net right here. And I am at the point that I need to splice a little bit. And so this one has staggered ends. See, they're all getting skinnier. And this one is ready to be spliced onto. That's why I have it ready for us. So, and can I have like another 10 minutes, Brooks? Is that okay? Because we started a little bit late. Are we running into somebody else's schedule?
So you're totally fine. Keep going.
Okay, great. So I've got my ends right here, and I've got my little bit of fiber I want to add. And you always want to add just a little fiber, because if you add a lot, that's a weak point in the string, because a string is only as strong, a piece of string is only as strong as its weakest splice. Sort of like a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. A piece of string is only as strong as its weakest splice. And so I always want to add a little bit so I'm not causing any kind of weakness. And the way I do this is going to be reversed, but I hold it like this and I slide my fiber in to the junction of those two. And this is a place where an end had just happened. And then I always untwist before I splice, and I grab that fiber here and I spin that up and it locks it in. You can't even really tell that I added it. And then I bring that other end around right here. This is called an elbow splice. There are a lot of different splicing methods too, but this is one of my favorite, because when I put it in, so you can't even see hardly any ends. There's a tiny little loop here that's going to get taken by the twist. And I do that reverse wrap to lock my splice in. And then I can just go right back to doing my leg rolling. As soon as I've laid the new fiber in, I can go right back to doing my leg rolling and roll it under my leg or under my hand on my leg so it's gripping. I bring it together. And then when I have them parallel is when I roll back, and then I can just keep going. And you can't even tell that I added in fiber there. So I'm not going to worry about keeping going right now, but I would usually do a little bit more, because now what I need to do is this, in order to make a knotted net, I need to have a thing called a shuttle. So this is something. I live in Northern California, and this is a style of shuttle that was developed by the local Native people that live in my area here, who are the Pomo people. This is something where there's shuttle designs all around the world. Everybody makes different styles, but I haven't really seen another culture that does this thing of splitting a single stick and binding it and seasoning it down. And it's just this beautifully elegant, amazing style of shuttle. So that's the one that I'm going to use for this demonstration. But like I said, giving acknowledgement that this is a Pomo style shuttle. So I'm going to wrap the fiber loosely around in a spiral. And a shuttle, in case anybody didn't understand what I said, is spelled S-H-U-T-T-L-E. So it shuttles a lot of fiber through a knot at one time. So it literally is like a shuttle that you shuttle people with. So I'm bringing it around, twisting it loosely here. And then I'm doing a spiral here, and I just have to load a little bit of my made string that I had already done, and I load it around, and I'm just loosely putting it on the shuttle so that I can, in tying a knot, I have to move all of the string through knots, and this allows me to do it pretty well. So I'm just loosely wrapping it until I get to the end, which I'm getting there. If I had been really stopping and making a lot of string, I would have done a lot more, because normally I would have the shuttle loaded up about that full when I would be stopping, because the cool thing about when you're making your own string as you're making a net is that when you run out of string, you make enough to load a shuttle, and then when you run out of string, you just stop, make more string, splice it on, and then when you get enough to load your shuttle again, you start again. And so there's never any joining knot on your finished net. There's a whole bunch of knots here, but they're just knots within the string. They're not joining knots. If you're making string from pre-made fiber, if you're making a net from pre-made string, you'll always, when you run out of the string, you have to do some sort of a joining knot. So you can tell by looking at the net if it was made by the person that was making the string at the same time, or if it was made by pre-made string. So I'm going to try, and I forgot to bring the rope. I have a rope right here. So I'm going to tie this to the chair, or to my window frame actually, so that you can see what I'm doing, because you need to have some tension. Normally I sit and I put it around my toe, or I affix it to a tree or something that I'm sitting next to. But I want to get some good size here. So I have to pull and have tension, like I said. This net is getting very long. So you can see right here, you can see what I'm going to be doing. And in order to make this work, I'm going to try to work so you can see what's happening here. So right now, I ran out of the string. And there's a lot of different styles of netting as well. But this is one that's just a basic netting. It's using what's called a sheet bend. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to see this under my hand. If I go like this, hold on. I'm going to get behind the computer. Brooks, can you tell me if I'm in the frame? Because I can't see the screen right now.
You are indeed in the frame.
And can you see what I'm doing?
Yeah, you're wrapping it around that.
This is
that. I don't know what that's called.
Yeah. So this piece of wood is called. This is called a measure, because it measures the mesh of the net. So the distance of this will be the size of the loops of the net. And then this is the shuttle because it shuttles the string through. So the way I keep adding knots to this is these are my previous loops from previous rows. And so what I do is I come behind the measure, I take my shuttle, which is like a needle, and I put it up over the measure and I bring it down through the next loop in my series. And I bring it back parallel with itself so that the two loops are right at the top of the measure. And right there, because that's where I want to tie my knot, I put my finger on it, and that allows it not to slip. And this is why I need to have my fiber on my shuttle, is that I bring my shuttle through, and then I bring it back through that loop I created, and I bring it back down. And with tension, when I pull, that's going to keep that knot right where my finger was. See, it's right at the top of the shuttle. So then I do it again. I bring it around the back and I just repeat this. And net making is an incredibly meditative practice. It's a very simple text knot. We're actually using what's called a sheet bend in order to tie these two strings together. I bring it to the top of my measure. I bring it around. I hold it with my finger. I come behind from the left, and then I come back through the loop I created. And that allows me to tie the sheet bend at that point of junction. If I went this way, I would be messing it up. I always have to turn, come around the back of the shuttle, back of the measure, and then I come back through my next loop. And I'm doing a big flat net here. That's going to be sort of like a hammock or a sling net. So I'm at the end now. You can do this in a spiral where you just keep going and make a spiral net going down, but I'm at my last knot here. So I put my finger there and I come around. And oops, if it slips, I got to bring it back right at the top of my measure. And then I tie my knot and I have my tight knot. And when I get to the end of my row, I can just take my measure out and I have a whole bunch of loops there. So to start over again, I flip it to the left, I flip it over. And then on my first one, I just come in and go behind my measure because I'm going down a row. I'm dropping down right now. And then I go up through my loop, back down on top of the measure again. And I put my finger here and I come around from the left behind the two strings I'm holding, back through the loop I created, and I tie my knot. And then I'm going behind my measure again. And now this whole row that I made is now all the loops that I'm going to throw and connect. So this is all about just connecting down to the next row. So I go to the next one. I come through here, I go behind, and I bring it back through. And I pull the knot tight. And then I just keep going back, until I get to the end of that row. And so that is the art of net making. These ancient technologies are technologies, but then it takes some time and some skill to get adept at doing them quickly and easily. Everybody has the ability to do them because our ancestors have been doing them for a very, very long time. Our bodies were actually sort of formed and designed, and like everything we are as modern humans came because we were doing the technologies that were allowing us to survive. So we all have the ability to do these things, but it's not something that necessarily is easy to be really good at the beginning. It's like any craft, you have to train with it, you have to work with it, and you have to be doing it for a long time. I've been doing the string making and the net making for over 25 years, 30 years. And so I make it look pretty easy when I'm doing it, but this is an ancient pandemic universal human skill that hopefully people will appreciate and will want. If you want to learn more, you can come join us at Archaeology Park next year. You can look at our the blog, which gives some information about some of the people at Archaeology Park. And then, there's programs and there's gatherings and there's skills events that happen. So this is something that is happening all around the world, where people are just trying to explore our roots, our connection to the earth, and where we came from, and by using our hands to make things.
Awesome. One question from the chat is where you learned this from.
So that's, it goes back to that cultural appropriation piece that we were talking about right before I came on, is that acknowledging your story and where you came from, especially if you are someone who is not obviously of indigenous descent. It's important in the United States here to tell where you came from in your history. That is on my website if you want to read the whole story, paleotechnics.com, but I can speak to it really briefly right now. I am not Native American. I'm primarily mostly sort of a Northern European mutt. There's a lot of Swedish in there. A lot of my ancestry is Swedish and German, which I like to point out to people is, just 5,000-6,000 years ago, my ancestors in Sweden were hunter-gatherers and were utilizing these technologies as well. And so, this is something, string making is everyone's ancestry. It is not owned by any single culture. It is a technology. The ways that it is culturally identifiable is how it's used to make patterns, how it's used, what's created with the string. So those are the important things to acknowledge on that level. But string making at its core is a pandemic universal human skill. But I have been doing this for a little over 30 years, and I got interested in it at the beginning by getting taken to a skills gathering. So if you go to my website, there's a skills gathering page, and the first gathering that I went to was called the Glass Buttes Nap-In, that is a flint knapping gathering. So people learning how to make stone tools, which is one of the big things that we do at Archaeology Park, which is another universal, pandemic human skills. The oldest stone tools go back 1.5 million years. So I was at an event where we were learning this. We were camped out on a mountain of obsidian and people were learning how to flint knap, and it's sort of a haphazard event. And interestingly enough, that is the event which is where John Stamp sort of got the first crew of people that were the demonstrators at Archaeology Park, because he came to that Glass Butte Nap-In, not the same year that I was there, but a couple of years later. And that's where he recruited one of my teachers, Jim Riggs, and another one of my teachers, Margaret Mathewson, to come to Archaeology Park and start demonstrating the skills. And so that was the first place that I got introduced to all of this. And then I went to another gathering that's a little bit more organized, that you can pay to attend. The Glass Butte Nap-In is a little bit sort of a hard camping experience and not very organized, but the Rabbit Stick gathering in Rexburg, Idaho still happens, and that's one where we go, and there's 80 other instructors. And so then I went to that shortly afterwards, and that's where I just really got hooked. I changed the entire course of my life and decided that I wanted to be dedicating it's what I love doing. I was always an artist, and I always liked using my hands to do things, but I sort of didn't really like modern art stuff. I didn't like using toxic materials, and I wanted to live in a more balance with the earth. And so ancient technologies to me was like the perfect way to be artistic, but be ultra functional and also ultra natural, working in balance with the natural world. And so I just started doing these and practicing the skills, and then people would learn that I could do this. And then they would ask me to teach classes. So I do workshops, and, I've written a few books. This is one on, I co-authored this on making brain tan buckskin, which is another one of the skills that I do, is tanning deer skins using a totally natural method of tanning and making fire by rubbing sticks together. And then I do a skills program. I have a school program with youth where and you can find it on my website, where I teach sixth graders, primarily fourth to sixth graders or third to sixth graders, how to use their hands and create things with their hands. So this has been what I just have done forever now. And it's what I love doing. And and working with children. And that's the way I feel like the most important thing is that we need to have a connection to the natural world, and working with children and getting them excited about using their hands and getting crafty. It sort of wakes up a lot of things in our brains, and a lot of old memories and a lot of old skills. And it's an important human thing to be using our hands.
Tamara, this is Jeff here, and I have a piece of hemp rope in my hand. You can't see me because of the way that we have our technology done, but if you stick around when I go live, I'll put my picture back up, and I'll show you this hemp rope that I've had for 30 years. And I'm building hemp cob houses and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you a glockenspiel here. So I'm really proud of you. That's really fantastic. We do need to teach the ancient traditions and keep it going, because we don't want AI to take care of everybody's jobs. And there's love in the rope. There's love in your leg, and so and the way that you're teaching it to not get carpal tunnel and yet have, that purity. If we slow down and speed up, we can slow down to ground ourselves and to touch the hemp plant and end prohibition and get our prisoners home. So you're doing a great job. I really appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Hemp hemp hooray.
Does it Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any other questions before I take off?
Yeah, any final words?
I'm getting a message that my connection is unstable, so I may drop me the space. You know, hopefully we will be back in person next year. And if you don't know about Archaeology Park, and if you have not visited us at Archaeology Park before, please come find us on the Upper River Loop right behind Daredevil Pavilion. And, you know, it's a great experience. I think it's one of the coolest spots in the fair, and there's hands-on workshops happening. There's demonstrations happening. There's flint napping going on. You can just hang out there all day. A lot of people come and never leave and just spend their whole fairs with us. So please come check us out if you have not. And then you can also see I see that Ann or DJ are here, and there's a beautiful display if you want to learn more about Kalapuya people and the ancestry of the fairgrounds. And please come to Ark Park and visit us next year. And if you want to go in the virtual fair, there's 4 videos showing up in the virtual fair. And like I said, if you go to my blog, you can see a few more skills being demonstrated. That's the direct link to the YouTube if you can't get in the virtual fair. So the videos are all accessible. Please watch them. They're by other members of our booth, and hopefully we'll see you next year.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm definitely coming to see you next year.
Totally.
I'm in the village, so not far away.
Yeah.
And I'm
Totally.
with Ann on the diversity committee. So yeah, lots of.
And I'm a hamster, and I waited all day, you know, because I'm in the back room here, and I'm a hamster, and I just turned it on, and there you are talking about hemp and rolling it. Is that called decorticating? Decorticating?
You know, I'm not clear about that term. I don't use that very often.
Because when they make
fabric,
fabric, they call it decorticating. They take the stems and they decorticate it into fibers to make. It's called decorticating to make it into the fabric.
yeah, I think it is, but I'm not sure if decorticating has to do with like really getting it down to the finer one. I'm not sure if it's extracting the wood or if it's from getting the glues out there, because there's sort of in fabric, like to make fabric out of fiber, you have to clean it further than what I did on the rope.
And
so I'm not sure. The
cool thing is to tell everybody on the planet here is that the hemp industry is so important to have huge in the world and globally and end prohibition, because hemp is not toxic and doesn't pose any threat to the whiteys and the jerks that don't want it to be toxic to their children. So hemp is obnoxious. It's not noxious. It's non-noxious.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
So hemp
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamara. We love you.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank
we'll
you
see
so
you
much.
tomorrow.
Yes, I will be here tomorrow at 5:30 in case anybody's coming in here later. And if you're totally missed it and can't see another demo, go to the videos. There's a plants for string making slideshow there that gives you a sort of an overview of what I just did.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Yes, see you tomorrow. You too.
And now for our next trick, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, our stream master extraordinaire.
Okay, well, hello, my children. Hello, it's been a long day. We got the rope lady. We got I didn't even know that this was a, let's see if I can get my, my camera back here properly. So I got my Oregon Country Fair on hat. I got so many Oregon Country Fair hats on here, but I'm going to see if I can get my background for us here, everybody. And we are totally, hey, my eCam, my eyeglasses is not on. So let's turn eyeglasses on.